Welcome to the Books Radar channel, where we summarize the essence content of best-selling books, helping you quickly grasp the book's core insight and save valuable time.
Today, I want to introduce you to a book called A Woman Makes a Plan. This is an autobiography, and the author is Maye Musk. When you hear Musk, does it remind you of someone else? That's right, this Maye Musk is actually the mother of Elon Musk. You're probably familiar with Elon Musk and his achievements in rocketry, electric cars, batteries, and satellites, but don't think that we're discussing this book today just because the author has an incredibly talented son. Maye Musk is an extraordinary person in her own right. Elon Musk has even said in interviews, "My mother is my hero." So, just how remarkable is Maye Musk? Let me share a few things with you. Maye Musk, when she was young, was a finalist in the Miss South Africa beauty pageant. 4 or 5 decades later, with her hair completely white, Maye Musk returned to the modeling stage, and her photos dominated for billboards in Times Square. Today, Maye Musk is a supermodel in her 70s. The cover of this book is a photo of Maye Musk, and as soon as you see it, you'll undoubtedly share my feeling, a woman in her 70s who still looks so stunningly beautiful. But that's not all. Maye has also developed her career in more than 10 cities across 3 countries and has earned 2 master's degrees. All of these achievements were accomplished by her alone, with almost no savings. Furthermore, Maye's life has been more challenging than we might imagine. She faced domestic violence at a young age, divorced at 31, and raised 3 children on her own. In the process of translating this book, Maye felt that the Chinese title, Struggle and Survival, would be more appropriate. Why did she choose this title? You can probably imagine that this woman's life was mostly spent in these 2 states. Therefore, she said, I hope that readers, while reading this book, can experience less of the pain brought by struggle and enjoy more of the joy of survival. There are many articles about Maye Musk in the market, but I can responsibly say that the majority of them are based on this book. So, let's take about 20 minutes to truly understand the legendary life of Maye Musk. Next, I will interpret this book based on 3 of her identities as a woman. The first identity is wife. Let's explore Maye's marital life and how she managed to overcome adversity and rebuild herself after experiencing domestic violence and a failed marriage. The second identity is mother. Let's understand how Maye, as a single mother, raised 3 children and how she balanced her career and family. The third identity is self. Let's see how Maye, as a woman, returned to the modeling stage at almost 70 years old and remained confident and true to herself. Part 1. Before we dive into her first identity as a wife, let's first talk about her upbringing. Maye grew up in an incredibly unique family. Live adventurously and cautiously was the motto she was raised with. Maye was born in Canada in 1948, and when she was just 2 months old, photos of her and her sister were published in the local newspaper, titled The Flying Twins. This was because Maye's parents would frequently take their children on adventures, flying their propeller plane around the world. Imagine this, it was 1948, just after World War II had ended, and most people hadn't even seen a television, let alone owned a private plane. People thought their behavior was crazy. In 1950, Maye's parents, having heard about the breathtaking beauty of South Africa from some missionaries, decided to pack up all their belongings in Canada and move the whole family to South Africa. So, this couple, with 4 young children, boarded a cargo ship and spent a whole 2 months getting to South Africa. Once in South Africa, they had to choose a city to settle in. You'd think that Canadians moving to South Africa would choose a more English-speaking and developed city like Johannesburg, the largest city in South Africa. But just how unique were Maye's parents? Flying over a small city called Pretoria, Maye's father was captivated by the beautiful landscapes below, covered in flowers. He had never seen anything so beautiful and declared, "Let's live here." This adventurous spirit of Maye's parents reflected in everything they did. They visited 60 countries, flew along the coast of Africa, through Asia, and across the Pacific. In each new place they visited, they would spray paint the name of the location on the plane's wings. Imagine that. They didn't have GPS or radios, they navigated with a compass. However, they were far from reckless. Adventurous and cautious meant that before every trip, they meticulously planned, checking the weather, marking maps, calculating fuel needs, practicing takeoffs and landings, and preparing for any unforeseen events. Every July, in the South African winter, Maye and her family would embark on a quest to find the lost city in the desert, inspired by a book her father had read. Just imagine, going into the wilderness with several children was no small feat. However, these children worked together like little adults, with each person having their own responsibilities. In the face of emergencies, they remained remarkably calm. Once, Maye's mother was accidentally stung by a poisonous scorpion. The situation was dire, but the children remained composed, using tourniquets and sucking the venom out of their mother's knee. If such a thing happened to most of us, we'd likely be in a panic, let alone children. Maye's father would always say, "There's nothing our family can't do." This became the motto of Maye and her siblings, shaping them into strong and independent individuals. You'll find that this adventurous and cautious spirit is also deeply ingrained in Elon Musk, where behind every seemingly crazy venture lies meticulous planning. It's truly a valuable family legacy. Now, when it comes to Maye's own marriage, it was more adventurous than cautious. Maye had an on-again, off-again boyfriend since she was 16. When she was in her third year of college, Maye discovered her boyfriend was cheating on her. This time, the heartbreak was too much, and she broke up with him for good. However, a year later, this same man reappeared at Maye's workplace with an engagement ring, proposing to her. When Maye rejected him, he persisted and even went to Maye's parents, falsely claiming that Maye had accepted his proposal. At that time, Maye and her parents were in different cities, and long-distance phone calls were too expensive. So, they usually communicated through telegrams or visits. All the information about her impending marriage came to Maye through telegrams. At that time, Maye's family was preparing for her twin sister's wedding, and her father, not aware of the situation, suggested that they could have a double wedding. Maye, who had just graduated and was feeling lonely and lacking self-confidence, had issues like body image and obesity. She had been yearning for someone to love her and treat her well. She even fantasized that this man truly loved her and would treat her kindly. So, she followed her father's telegram advice, quit her job, packed her bags, and returned home to get married. But little did she know, her husband started physically abusing her during their honeymoon. Maye was terrified and wanted to tell her family several times, but couldn't bring herself to do it due to the embarrassment. Shortly after, she became pregnant, and within 3 years, she had 3 children. Becoming a mother brought joy, but it also deepened her involvement in this tumultuous marriage. Can you imagine how miserable Maye's marriage life was? She endured domestic violence, was isolated from everyone, and faced constant insults and verbal abuse. Her husband would often threaten her, saying that if she ever tried to divorce him, he would use a razor to cut her face or even shoot the children's knees, leaving her alone to care for 3 disabled children. These escalated acts of cruelty turned Maye's life into a living hell. I've selected a passage from the book that describes some of the brutal details. When Maye was giving birth to her first child, Elon, her husband forced her to continue working even when she was experiencing contractions. As the pain grew more intense, she had to slow down her work pace, which led to her being scolded as lazy, weak, and useless by her husband. He even refused to take her to the hospital, waiting until contractions were only 5 minutes apart. Can you imagine? After experiencing 3 days of false labor, she gave birth without any pain relief. To this day, Maye says she can still feel the pain. Despite these experiences being decades in the past, whenever she recalls them, she's overcome with sadness to the point of losing sleep. May writes in the book, "Anger and resentment welled up in my heart time and time again. The person I became in that relationship was not who I wanted to be." Fortunately, amidst the physical and emotional torment of her family life, May never gave up on her career, even if it meant doing so secretly. These jobs continually bolstered her self-confidence and prevented her from losing herself entirely in this terrible marriage. When May turned 31, she finally had the courage to choose divorce, ending a 9-year nightmare. Her only wish was to gain custody of her 3 children, even if it meant receiving not a cent, as long as she could end it all quickly. The divorce process wasn't smooth, and her ex-husband, in a bid to gain custody of the children, constantly threatened and harassed her, repeatedly taking her to court for a decade. For May, she'd rather go to court time and time again, prepare legal documents, and face the pain of possibly losing her children than live in constant fear. May said this was her dark period before dawn. If you consider the historical context, you'd admire May even more. Why is that? Because in South Africa at that time, women had almost no legal protection in marriage. Even if a man abused a woman, it couldn't be grounds for divorce. In fact, in people's common mindset, it was perfectly acceptable for men to abuse women. What does that mean? It meant that once domestic violence began, it would continue throughout a woman's life, never ending. Can you imagine? For most people, the prospect of a lifetime of such suffering would make them feel trapped, with no way out. Many women at the time did indeed fall into this despair. But not May. She continued to work, endured until South Africa finally greenlit the divorce legislation, and left the despairing life that had brought her down the path of self-discovery. In fact, life is not easy, and reality can be brutally unforgiving. You submit to life, but life doesn't necessarily treat you kindly. Since the art of life is more like wrestling than dancing, when you fall, just get up from the mud with determination. Part 3. Next, let's explore May's third identity, self. How did she make a remarkable return to the modeling stage at nearly 70, proudly embracing her gray hair and being herself? With her 3 children off to college and pursuing their own passions, May's life was improving, and she no longer had to worry about making ends meet. Moreover, her eldest son, Elon Musk, had become a billionaire. In our imagination, May could have led a comfortable life, perhaps even enjoying the pleasures of being a grandmother. However, May chose a different path. She realized that she could finally live for herself, without the need to live for others. She felt the urgency to make the most of her time to pursue what she truly wanted. She described herself in the book with a striking phrase, "I'm running like a bullet now." So, how did May embark on this bullet pace of life? Let me share a few key moments for you to feel her journey. At the age of 46, May embarked on a writing project. She wrote for 5 hours every night and an astonishing 12 hours on weekends. Between publishing books and delivering speeches, she felt that all her endeavors were seamlessly coming together, boosting her confidence. To move to San Francisco in the United States, she had to retake the registered dietitian license exam to continue her career. However, she was struck by sciatica, a condition somewhat similar to a herniated disc. At around 50, most people might consider retirement, but May persevered, studying while lying down and successfully passing the exam. Later on, a chance encounter led May to attend a seminar on nutrition entrepreneurship in New York. She found the atmosphere in New York to be entirely different. The fast-paced, no-nonsense attitude of the people there and their readiness to act immediately drew her in. Without a second thought, she moved to New York. But that's not all. Even in her 60s, May set numerous goals for herself, including learning various social media platforms to share her life. During Paris Fashion Week, she and her friends created 67 different street-style looks and posted them on a photo wall. With her distinctive white hair and diverse outfits, these photos garnered widespread attention on the internet. This venture also led to more opportunities to collaborate with top fashion shows. Taking it to the next level, in her 60s, Maye became a Model 4 cover girl, a cosmetics brand. To achieve the desired photographic effects, she danced on rooftops in high heels. She even did 2 nude photo shoots, using her work to advocate for awareness of health and topics related to mature pregnancy. At the age of 67, Maye's photos occupied 4 billboards in Times Square, New York. At 71, she authored A Woman Makes a Plan, and in the book, Maye felt that her career had reached its peak. On social media, she tagged herself with the label, "Feeling great at 71." In fact, within Maye's own family, there's another remarkable older woman, her mother. Once, she traveled the world with a young Maye, and in her later years, she remained full of energy. She started learning art, photography, and painting in her 60s. When she was in her 70s, she began studying etching, a highly intricate form of art. Just to give you an idea, this process involves using a needle to draw on a metal plate and then using various chemicals and tools to create impressions on paper. At the age of 94, due to severe hand tremors, Maye's mother couldn't continue her fine artwork and shifted to learning digital art. You see, age seems irrelevant to all these accomplishments. In fact, when Maye said her career had reached its peak, I believe she spoke too soon. Given the nature of their family, we can't even begin to guess what further legendary experiences Maye may have in store. This concludes the essence of this book. If you find yourself intrigued by this biography, we recommend obtaining a copy for further reading. The end.
If you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Your support keeps me motivated to create more valuable content. Thanks for listening. See you in the next video.